My name is Rahul Raj, and I run Five and Vine, the marketing agency for challenger brands. A challenger brand is one that unseats the incumbent, one that sort of observes there's something inequitable or unfair or just ridiculous to do with the industry or business model and is resolutely determined to change that reality. Five and Vine has been around for 8 years. The nature of the work has changed dramatically over the 8 years. And I think that's driven by largely changes in technology from an over reliance and dependence on paid media to now things like owned, earned, and branding. It just feels like the Wild West at the moment. It is really tricky for brands. It is really tricky for marketing. Um, and it's not just global trade and it's not just AI, but it is the economic pressure that people feel. It is the disruption in the relationships that we have with brands, where there's so many more D2C brands, the consolidation of purchasing patterns on Amazon and with e-commerce. There's just so much that is changing that a lot of the rules of marketing may be somewhat similar, but their efficacy is changing dramatically. Here are the top three things that are giving me pause. One is the role of AI to disrupt people's economic livelihood, and in particular, white collar workers. Um, Previously, I think that level of intelligence was associated with humans, and we paid for that expertise. Now, when you're able to chronicle that expertise and have it on demand, it is changing the nature of work. We're forecasting an 80% reduction in anything that a client would pay for with respect to copywriting. Probably a similar range, 60% drop in branding. I think things are changing dramatically, but that also plays out to clients. I think there's going to be an attrition of marketing teams and an engagement with fewer AI jockeys that can marry their intellect along with technology to essentially do more with less. New channels are emerging, but I think it's still early to draw a conclusion about how to effectively manage them. So there's discussion already underway and efforts already underway with AI optimization as a replacement for SEO. On a personal level, my search volume has dropped meaningfully. I would say 60%. I've gone from sourcing a few prospective answers to getting an answer from AI. And so if most of my answers are found through AI, it changes the nature of Google being able to serve me ads and the relevance of my SEO efforts in showing up first. Now I'm looking for, how do I work with AI so that my agency and the brands that we work for show up as recommended options on ChatGPT and other platforms. Truthfully, I think it's quite complicated because even though there's a tremendous role for brands in real life, the nature of our in real life relationships is also evolving. If majority, or at least much of our human connection is done virtually, it means that when we're together, there's still a little bit of sussing someone out, perhaps trying to figure out the extent to which their online persona mirrors their in real life persona. And so it changes the nature of the brand engagement, because I think that plays out in a similar way, which is, here's the way that I've perceived your brand online, but how do you show up in real life? I think it's quite challenging to have an authentic relationship. I think, as we've seen, even with changes in the US, like trust takes a long time to build and can be lost in an instant. I think that people are becoming more acute to inconsistency and perhaps slightly less forgiving of that inconsistency. So if your first point of interaction with a brand in real life doesn't align with the online persona, perhaps you're more quick to dismiss and just say, like, we don't have a lot of social capital built up. Peace, I'm out. And so I think it's quite challenging. The assessment of authenticity is may borrow some attributes from a job interview where you're often asked about your strengths and your vulnerabilities, about what you accomplished at your last job, but perhaps where value was left on the table or why you didn't stay longer. In other words, there's a candid explanation of strengths and weaknesses. I think we've seen that mirrored somewhat where, let's say, 4.4 or 4.6 star reviews out of 5 are more valuable than 5-star reviews because nothing is perfect. But the more candid we can be about our shortcomings, either as brands, individuals, spaces like Startwell, it reveals that we're not so arrogant and manipulative to gloss over the truth, which is we are great, but we're not perfect. Tech for Canada, I think it's really quite exciting to gather a whole bunch of brilliant minds in the Canadian tech space to learn from one another, to share honorably, authentically, and vulnerably about what's working and what's not, but also the admission of the unknown. These are very interesting times, not only for the country, but for the globe. It's changing the notion of trust and institutions and political leaders that we can rely on versus ones that we need to hedge against. With the rise of AI, which platforms we can rely on and which ones we need to start solving for. So to have those conversations in an authentic way enables us to be better together. This is a moment where we need to come together and share insights because we're banding together in the fight of our lives. And I think that together we can make it through. I think Canadians want to support each other, particularly when the product or service delivers parity or if not superior to foreign alternatives. That said, getting honest feedback about why someone would or wouldn't consider you or partner together so that we can go further together is also helpful. So there is a lovely aspect to being Canadian that is about being polite and perhaps sometimes sheltering others from the truth. This isn't the moment for that. This is the moment for honesty, for candor, but also for partnership. If we can help make one another better and be truthful about what the alternatives we're considering are, I think it just makes for a far more earnest and productive conversation. I think Canada is the most extraordinary country on the planet. It's our social values mixed with our economic drive. Framed in a slightly different way, we want to win. We just care about how we win. And that is the reason, that is one of the prime reasons why building challenger brands in Canada for the world is more necessary now than ever before. We are seeing with clarity the alternatives to winning at all cost that are happening elsewhere. It is jeopardizing things like climate change, diversity efforts, ethics, morality, self-interest, all sorts of really egregious flaws in the system. That is not who we are. It will never be who we are. It is antithetical to our foundation, but the world is critical of those behaviors. And we can be a shining star, a beacon for the world to demonstrate that you can win and win big, but you care how you win. And that's really what differentiates you.